Ibn Taymiyyah's use of the word miracle for the possible mentions of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So first of all, Ibn Taymiyyah does refute the New Testament. He knows the difference between the New Testament and the Injeel. Okay, he makes this distinction. He says, with regards to the Gospels that the Christians have, there are 4 Gospels. Okay, and he acknowledges that these are written by these men after the Messiah was taken up into the Sama. They did not claim they are the word of Allah, or that the Messiah conveyed them from Allah. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah clearly, Sami Amari states that Shaykh al-Islam's stance on the alteration of the Injeel is clear. He distinguishes between the Injeel revealed to the Messiah and what was written afterwards. Thus, his concept of alteration here requires clarification. It's not about the changing of the original. It's about that later writings borrowed from the Messiah's words that had been revealed to him. So here Sami Amari is pointing out that Ibn Taymiyyah, his concept of Torah and Injeel was fundamentally, he understands the Islamic concept of Injeel, and he knows that the New Testament is not that. So let's look at Ibn Taymiyyah's view of the Old Testament holistically. Because as I mentioned, it seems to be that Ibn Taymiyyah believed that the Old Testament was an altered Torah, or the Pentateuch was an altered Torah, rather than a fully substituted book. And this is an opinion that not many people take in this day and age due to modern scholarship. As Sami Amari mentioned before, modern scholarship has concluded that Ibn Hazm was correct, that it's more of a substituted book. However, when we look at the holistic reading of his works, we can see that although he may have viewed the Old Testament as an altered Torah, or if you like, the Pentateuch as an altered Torah, he still doesn't view it as reliable and authentic. He refutes the Old Testament in many ways. He said it was written, authored by Ezra 800 years after Moses. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah understands the Islamic concept of Torah. He knows about the Torah given to Moses. However, he's clearly outlining that what they call the Torah today is authored by Ezra. He also points out that there's no isnad. There's no reliable isnad. It's not reliable. It's suffered over 1,000 years of lack of isnad. There's no way of connecting it back to Allah or his messenger. He also points out that there's many lies within it. He mentions some of the lies, some of the corruptions that they've made. He even goes to the extent of saying the devil inspired it. Believe it or not. And this is something I said many years ago, and people laughed me out of the park with that. But subhanAllah, the devil has certainly touched the Bible. So yes, we agree Ibn Taymiyyah had this understanding that, although it seems to be the wrong understanding, that the Pentateuch is an altered Torah and Injeel, where most people don't accept this opinion anymore. They accept that the Pentateuch was never the Torah and Injeel. It's authored by people. Even the Jews themselves don't claim it's the Torah. From our perspective, they claim it's authored by Moses and other scribes. And they even claim it's rewritten by Ezra. The point we're making here is, when you look at the holistic understanding of his opinion, he still doesn't see it as reliable. He still refutes it. So the outcome is the same. Another important point to understand, we don't actually fully know the contents of the Bible that he had. Now, Ibn al-Qayyim quotes parts of the Bible in his time, 700 years after the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and it's not even in the Bible of today. So Ibn al-Qayyim quotes some things in the Bible that are not in today's Bible. So the chances are, Ibn Taymiyyah, we don't actually know what he was fully commenting on. Now, it seems that 90% or more of what he had was the Bible, right? However, just to to clarify, we don't actually know exactly what he had. Also, this opinion about believing the Old Testament is an altered Torah, or the Pentateuch is an altered Torah, nobody holds this opinion anymore. This is not a valid opinion. So we can't take the opinion of Ibn Hazm that it's written by men and have Ibn Taymiyyah's conclusions. It doesn't work. I mean, Ibn Taymiyyah's conclusions about the Bible. We can take Ibn Taymiyyah's conclusions about the one in Medina because it's not connected. He's concluding that from the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, if the Bible was originally the Torah and Injeel, the truths are likely what has remained of Wahi. So if Ibn Taymiyyah does hold that view, that it was originally the Torah and Injeel and it's been altered, then I can understand him. It would be a consistent belief to think that the truths are what has remained of Wahi. Therefore, you would describe it as miraculous. You would describe these things because you're assuming a connection. However, if you take the position that the Bible is not the Torah and Injeel, we cannot be sure of the source of these truths, as we mentioned before. So it would be a stretch to assume that it's Wahi. And with due respect, that it's a wrong opinion. That as Sami Amri mentioned, modern critical analysis has shown that Ibn Hazm is correct regarding what the Bible is. So today we hold the view it is not and it never was the Torah and Injeel. Therefore, we cannot assume that the truths within it are what has remained of Wahi. So when we use terminology like Wahi or miracles, you might use this terminology in a loose sense of the term, even though it'd be a bit confusing. But if we're going to be strict about it, we shouldn't use these terms when referring to the Bible, even the term prophecy, because you're assuming that it's revelation. But if you use it in the loose sense of the term, then no problem. But if you're going to be strict and say, do you actually mean a prophecy? Do you actually mean a miracle? Then this requires some sort of, research, some sort of proof for that. So another important point is Ibn Hazm speaks about this concept of calling it prophecy or miracles. He says, after quoting the Pentateuch, after quoting the Old Testament, he says, it's absolutely not permissible for anyone of sound mind to use a fabricated, invented, false report as evidence for the validation of a law, the transmission of a miracle, or the establishment of prophethood with false, fabricated, and forged transmission. This is what is beyond doubt. We have said, or we say, that the transmission of the Jews is corrupt and false. I think that's a very kind of good conclusion from Ibn Hazm, that look, we don't say that in the strict sense of the term, once we understand the Bible to be a substituted book.